Lesson 3. The Mongols in China. For nearly 30 years Ibn Battuta had traveled the world, moving from one adventure to the next. His journey to the Chinese port city of El Zaitan, known today as Quanzhou, left him with memories that came to life when he closed his eyes. Ibn Battuta was back in Morocco now, and the Sultan had requested that he dictate what he could remember of his travels to a writer. El Zaytun is a large city, and in it they make the best flowered and colored silks as well as satins, which are therefore preferred to those made in other places. Its port is one of the finest in the world. I saw in it about 100 large junk ships. The small vessels were innumerable numerous. It is a large estuary outlet of the sea, running into the land until it meets the great river. In this and other Chinese towns, each inhabitant has a garden and some land, in the center of which is his house, and on this account it is that their cities are so large. Ibn Battuta. (1355). Mongol expansion. Guiding question. Why were the Mongols able to build a vast empire so quickly? By the 1200s, Chinese civilization had made many achievements in government, technology and the arts. However, enemies to the north were preparing to invade China. The Mongols, the dominant nomadic group in Central Asia, became the first non-Chinese people to rule all of China. Who were the Mongols? The Mongols came from an area north of China called Mongolia. They lived in movable tents called yurts and raised horses, sheep and yaks or long-haired oxen. Mongols were made up of clans, or groups of related families. They followed their herds as the animals grazed the large steppes of Mongolia. The steppes are wide, grassy plains stretching from the Black Sea to northern China. Early in their history, the Mongols developed skills that were necessary for nomadic living. The Mongols were excellent horseback riders. Their children learned to ride a horse at age 4 or 5, and then they spent much of their lives on horseback. The Mongols also developed their fighting skills. Riding on their horses toward an enemy, the Mongols could accurately shoot arrows from far distances. As they got closer to their enemy, the Mongols attacked them with swords and spears. Genghis Khan. In 1206, a meeting of Mongol leaders took place in the Gobi. This vast desert covers parts of Mongolia and China. At that meeting, a warrior named Temujin was elected Genghis Khan, or strong ruler. Genghis Khan set out to unify the Mongol clans. He created a new legal code, and formed a group of clan chiefs to help him plan military campaigns. From this time until his death, Genghis Khan fought to conquer lands beyond Mongolia. Genghis Khan created an army of more than 100,000 trained warriors. The soldiers were placed in groups called units. The units were then placed under the command of skilled officers. These officers were chosen for their abilities rather than their social position. These changes made the Mongols the most skilled fighting force in the world at that time. Under Genghis Khan, Mongol forces conquered other people of the steppes. These victories brought tribute money to the Mongol treasury. The victories also attracted new recruits to the army. Soon the Mongols were powerful enough to attack major civilizations. In 1211, thousands of Mongols invaded China. Within 3 years they controlled all of northern China. They then invaded western kingdoms that controlled parts of the Silk Road. Genghis Khan and his Mongol warriors became known for their cruel fighting and use of terror. Terror refers to violent acts that are meant to cause fear. Mongol soldiers attacked, looted, and burned cities. Within a short time, many people began surrendering to the Mongols without even fighting them. Empire builders. After Genghis Khan died in 1227, his vast territory was divided into 4 territories called Khanates. The northwestern Khanate was known as the Golden Horde. Led by Genghis Khan's grandson Batu, its warriors swept into parts of Eastern and Central Europe. The southwestern Khanate, known as the El Khanate, led by his grandson Hulagu, advanced into the Muslim kingdoms of the Middle East, overran Persia, captured Baghdad in 1258, then moved into Syria and Palestine on their way to Egypt. The Muslim leaders of Egypt, known as the Mamluks, stopped the two Khanates' advance in 1260. Meanwhile in the east, another grandson, Kublai Khan, focused on conquering all of China. These areas formed the vast Mongol Empire. Mongol rule stretched from the Pacific Ocean in the east, to Eastern Europe in the west, and from Siberia in the north to the Himalaya in the south. The Mongols created the largest land empire in history. The Mongols caused a great amount of damage to the lands they conquered, but they also brought stability. This stability encouraged trade and closer contact between Asia and Europe. Many of the great trade routes between Asia and Europe crossed Mongol lands. The Mongols grew wealthy because they taxed the products that were traded along these roads. The Mongols admired the cultures they conquered. They generally tolerated all religions, and sometimes they adopted their beliefs and customs. For example, the Mongols in Southwest Asia accepted Islam and adopted Arab, Persian, and Turkish ways. The Mongols also learned from the Chinese. As they fought Chinese troops, the Mongols learned about gunpowder and its use as an explosive. They saw the Chinese use the fire lance, a weapon that the Chinese later developed into the gun and cannon. Adopting gunpowder and the fire lance from the Chinese, the Mongols became even more frightening to their opponents. Mongol conquest of China. Guiding question: how did the Mongols rule the Chinese? In 1260, the grandson of Genghis Khan, Kublai, became the new Mongol ruler. Kublai Khan continued the conquest of China that his grandfather had begun in 1264. Kublai established his capital at Khanbalik, the city of the Khan in northern China. Today, the modern city of Beijing is located on the site of the former Mongol capital. Mongols and Chinese. In 1271, Kublai Khan decided he would control all of China. By 1279, Kublai Khan finished conquering southern China. He brought an end to the Song dynasty and declared himself emperor. Kublai Khan started the Yuan dynasty. The term Yuan means beginning. The Yuan dynasty would last only about 100 years. Kublai Khan would rule for 30 of those years, until his death in 1294. To keep tight control of these new lands, Kublai appointed Mongol leaders to top jobs in China. He also kept some Chinese officials in positions of power. The Mongol culture was quite different from the Chinese culture. The Mongols had their own language, laws, and customs. These characteristics separated them from the Chinese people they ruled. Mongols lived apart from the Chinese and did not mix with them socially. These cultural differences allowed the Chinese to continue the Song dynasty belief that China and its traditions were superior to barbarian peoples. Government and religion. In government affairs, the Yuan regime did not use civil service examinations as was previously done in China. Government jobs were open to non-Chinese people, including Mongols and Turks. Although the Yuan rulers respected Confucian writings, they replaced Chinese scholar officials to ensure control over the government. Like many Chinese, the Mongols in China practiced Buddhism, but they were respectful of other religions. For example, Kublai Khan encouraged Christians, Muslims, and Hindus from outside China to practice their faiths. Under Mongol rule, China reached the height of its wealth and power. Foreigners were drawn to its capital city. Although they were foreigners, the Mongols gradually won the support of many Chinese people. Some Chinese appreciated the order and prosperity that the Mongols brought to the country. Foreign visitors were attracted to China, and reached it by traveling along the Silk Road. Marco Polo. One of the most famous European travelers to reach China was Marco Polo. He came from the city of Venice in Italy. Polo lived in the capital of Khanbalik during the reign of Kublai Khan. He wrote his impressions of the magnificent appearance of this city. The streets are so straight and wide that you can see right along them from end to end and from one gate to the other. And up and down the city there are beautiful palaces, and many great and fine hostelries and fine houses in great numbers. All the plots of ground on which the houses of the city are built are 4 square and laid out with straight lines, all the plots being occupied by great and spacious palaces, with courts and gardens of proportionate size. All these plots were assigned to different heads of families. Each square plot is encompassed by handsome streets for traffic. And thus the whole city is arranged in squares just like a chessboard, and disposed in a manner so perfect and masterly that it is impossible to give a description that should do it justice. Marco Polo. Concerning the city of Khanbalik, 1297, Kublai was fascinated by Marco Polo's stories about his journeys. For about 16 years, Polo was a privileged resident BF China. Kublai sent him on trips all over the region to gather information and carry out business. For some of those years, Polo ruled the Chinese city of Yangzhou. When Polo returned to Italy, he wrote a book about his adventures. His book gave Europeans knowledge of China and Central Asia. His descriptions of these places, their rulers and their goods generated interest in trade between Europe and China. Trade and empire. The Mongol Empire stretched from China to Eastern Europe. As a result, Mongol China prospered from increased overland trade with many parts of the world. The Yuan dynasty also built ships and expanded seagoing trade. China traded tea, silk, and porcelain in exchange for goods such as silver, carpets, cotton, and spices. Muslims and Europeans also took Chinese discoveries and technologies such as the manufacture of paper, porcelain, movable type, gunpowder, and the magnetic compass, back to their homelands. Mongol armies advanced into Vietnam and northern Korea. The rulers of Korea, called the Koryo, remained in power because they agreed to Mongol control. The Mongols forced thousands of Koreans to build warships. The Mongols used these ships in 2 attempts to invade Japan. Both voyages ended in failure when huge storms destroyed much of the fleet. Site of encounter: Quanzhou. One of the major trade cities during the Mongols' Yuan dynasty was Quanzhou, located on a large natural harbor in southeast China. The Tang dynasty founded the city in the 700s. Emperors of the Tang, Song, and Yuan dynasties selected Quanzhou as one of a few cities that could trade directly with foreign merchants. Chinese maps often identified the city as the starting point for sea-based trade with the West. As trade expanded, Mongol emperors grew wealthy from taxes that were added to foreign goods coming into China. Quanzhou's status as an official trade city brought merchants from Arabia, Persia, India, and Europe who often lived in business centers within the city. Quanzhou officials allowed foreign residents to practice their own religions. The city housed Muslim mosques, Hindu temples, Buddhist shrines, and Christian churches, in addition to sites where traditional religions were practiced. Mongol emperors promoted the exchange of ideas among the Chinese, Mongols, and foreign merchants. Later emperors banned sea trade at times in the SNS, leading to the decline of Quanzhou as a major trade city.